Hey, I'm going to tell you about something called Change Your Life. It's a 10-day crash course I designed. Most people right now need to change something major in their lives, whether it's job, whether it's career, whether it's something with family or relationship or with finances or with dreams coming true. That's what Change Your Life is all about. I'll tell you more further in the episode.
Welcome to the Yoga Healer podcast. It's Kate Stillman, and many of you have heard, maybe not, that my cousin Andy Stillman is joining me at the helm of Yoga Healer, and his background is I would say opposite of mine.
Not opposite.
Complementary.
Yeah, that's a better word. Yin yang.
That's your word.
Yin yang.
Yin yang. Yeah, that's right. So Andy's held senior roles at a number of large multinational corporations, including E-Trade, Citigroup, Deutsche Bank, and what is the other one? Society General and Coopers and Lybrand. What's that one about?
Oh, well, Coopers and Lybrand is now PwC, which is a giant accounting and consulting firm.
Okay.
And Société Générale is just a large French bank. SocGen, most people know it by.
Okay, got it. That's good to know. So, and you've been COO, like Chief Operating Officer and in-house consultant. Yeah. So
my roles have been like on the business side, finance background, and spent a lot of time around technology and around like particularly the trading businesses, the equities trading business. And I've been a chief operating officer and a chief administrative officer for a lot of those businesses. So basically helping to run those businesses within large banks with all the internal mechanisms of what it takes to run a business. That's
that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this on Yoga Healer, we've done a number of episodes in the past, these Dharma and Dollars episodes, but we've never had anyone who really understands world finance. So I thought it's kind of an amazing opportunity to really dive into a number of topics around this. Because one of the things that I find is that, because I coach a number of different people and have over, the last 20 years, and I find investing, I often find that people don't invest in what they actually want. And sometimes it's because they haven't specified what they want over time. And there's so much cultural, there's so much culture around what you should invest in. And it's really limited to a certain number of, I mean, I don't really understand it because often we're talking with people on, about a course and they really want to do the course, and the course would really help them get to where they want to go. And they can't make that investment decision because they've never invested in that way in the past. So I thought we could just start talking about investing in what you want and how to do that in a way that starts to compound so that it gets easier and easier to continually invest in what you want and give you yields that are, I mean, the idea to me is that are honestly start to become beyond your wildest dreams.
Yeah, I mean, there's a classic example of compounding interest, and we can talk about that later, where if you invest a certain amount of money at a point in time, and with compounding interest, it accelerates in a very different way than if you just kind of got the same amount of interest every year, every month, or whatever it is, because it pays interest on the interest, right? And that's a curve that looks like this with a very steep exponential looking slope after some period of time, right? And that's a concept in finance, but I think it certainly applies to investments. And what you said before about people not investing, they may not have invested financially, and they may not have invested in themselves or knowingly, like really with a purpose, and I think one of the things you started out with, which is, what do you want to achieve or goal? Like that's important, right? Like what are your goals? And I think kind of before you start investing, you should know what you're trying to achieve, because if you could be investing in the wrong places, right?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, that's just it. And then what I see too is the way as human beings, like we're very habitual. And so the way that we spend or invest money often stays the same.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't doesn't change that much. And there's all these patterns, right? So people often in some ways mimic or rebel against what their parents did.
Yeah.
And so there's often not a lot of just intentionality and investigation into, hey, what do I want? What am I actually doing? And how do I align? At least I know, I mean, when I find, because I feel like I've been on a self-growth path, I feel like my entire life, like without, like just nonstop, rocket to the moon sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I still have deep patterns that I look at in myself with like how I think about where I want to put dollars so that I do get that compound interest effect in my life.
Right. Right. But you have a vision of kind of what your ultimate goal is, or at least you have a reasonable vision of it, and it may change over time. But a lot of people kind of, it's a lot easier not to do that. I think for many people, just kind of let the tides take them wherever the tides are going to take them. They don't have to worry about it. It's work to invest. It's work to think about investing. It's work to kind of consider the pros and cons of different investments, in yourself, money, in an actual financial investment. And I also think for what we do, there's a lot of people may not make the connection between making a financial investment in a stock or a bond or something versus making an investment in this. They don't view them as similar ideas, even though I think they really are. It's just a different form of an investment. And I think people, well, I have some money, so let me put it, let me put it in my savings account, or let me invest in the stock market or something. And that could be perfectly fine for some things. And for others, if you have different set of goals, investing in yourself in a different way, right? And I think that's the connection that people need to make.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, when you're talking about that, I was thinking about role modeling. Because for me, because I've been in wellness for so long, right? Like I've hung out with the gurus.
Yep.
And so I've seen something demonstrated in like people in their 7th decade or 8th decade that you just don't see if you're a normal American, so to speak, or a normal European or a normal Australian, like where most of our listener base is, right?
Yeah.
Like you're not actively looking for examples of how you want to feel in your body and how you want to be able to move and what you want to be able to know about healing, self-healing. If you don't have examples of that, you won't know. Whereas I had good examples. I had good examples growing up of how to invest in home ownership, how to invest in, 401k. Like those things were not hard to find. Like that was in the culture of what I was raised in. So to not do that would have been aberrant. Like that would have been, rebellious. And if I had had a reason to rebel against that, I would have, but it seemed smart enough to me. I find that unless, and I guess I find that unless we have role models, it's hard to know. It's hard to know what it could look like or what you're even aiming for. And people aren't thinking, right? That's the problem with 20-year-olds. They don't want to start their 401k because they don't care what it's going to be like when they're 70. Like it's too far away.
Yeah. Well, that's, yes, there's a really interesting equation that you could look at as far as if you start saving when you're 20, like let's just say a 401k or retirement plan, or it doesn't even have to be official. Like, hey, I'm going to put $100 a month, away starting when I'm 20 until, let's just say until I retire. If you start that at 20, if you start that at 30, 40, like if you look at what you'll end up with at the end, it's way different than you think it is because of what we said before, which is the impact of compounding, returns, compound interest, or whatever the returns are over time. It's a huge difference. And that's one of the reasons that I think 401ks really exist and encourage people to start saving, because, they will end up with a lot more at the end than they would have if they started much later in life. It's a way to sort of give people an excuse to save because, oh, well, they'll just take it out. And the company, in a lot of cases, a company will match it or things of that nature if you work for a big company. But at the end of the day, from a financial standpoint, it's certainly the smart thing to do if you can do it. And I would say the same thing is true. It's not just money, right? It's money to get money. It's like you said, habits to get better habits. I think it works exactly the same way. It may not be as, you can't draw it out on an equation the same way you could for interest rates, but the habits that if you start developing those habits when you're 20 or younger, by the time you're 50 or 60, like they'll have reinforced themselves many times over than if somebody who just started much later, right? You'll be at a much better place.
Oh, and that's what I get really curious about is like, well, maybe we can draw it out. Like maybe, I mean, to me, that would be a really fascinating white paper, is because if we look at it, there's two different ways. I'm just thinking it off the top of my head. Like one is if you look at, a population of people in their 60s that have, major diseases. So, like the major diseases, the inflammatory diseases, right? The ones that are mostly due to habit, right? And preventable. So, and we look at, well, and say they decide, well, I'm going to start eating healthy at 60, right? It's kind of like game over. But if they were raised with, if they raised themselves or were raised with the habits around healthy eating and exercise and breathing, it would compound. This is my theory, right? It would compound and they would naturally be tuned in to like, oh, and there's superfoods. Oh, and there's breathing techniques. Oh, and there's things like yoga, which are very, at the root of it, hard, but get you in your body doing the hard work that really changes how energy works in your body. And these things compound. And then you're more open-minded and looking for other sources of information rather than just doing the same because habits that close people down, to me, it's very similar to just not saving, like not putting or not investing. I don't want to use the word saving, not investing.
Yeah, I completely agree. And if you think about, a person as like, kind of like a shell, with a nut inside, that you got to crack the nut, right? Because that shell is formed by their, say, initial environment. Like you said, you may have some, you may have had growing up some, tendencies towards savings or home ownership or some of the more solid things that people do as far as financial investments, but you weren't exposed to some of these sort of holistic views of health and things of that nature. You had to like crack that shell somehow, and somebody had to help you crack it and then open it up. And then you have the mentors and people like you're exposed to a larger universe of possibilities, right? That if you're closed-minded, then you just kind of don't want to change, or you may want to change, but you don't know how. And it's really a matter of like letting go a little bit of all those things you're trying to control, I think, and kind of saying, look, there are alternatives to doing the things that I've been doing, because all the things that I've been doing maybe not getting me to where I want to be. And that goes back to, again, where do I want to be? Like thinking about, I think that's the first step, from a financial investment or any other in your body or health or things of that nature. What do I want? And what do I really want? Like I can say, am I willing to commit an investment in that in order to get where I want to get to, whether it's financially or whatnot. So for example, if I'm 20 years old and I say, well, I want to retire when I'm, 65, and I know I'm going to need, I think, X amount of money to do that. You can do the math and say, well, in order to do that, I need to save this amount from the time I'm 20 per month or per year or whatever to get to that number. And, you can make certain assumptions about interest rates or whatever. Yeah. That's what you'll follow that.
Yeah.
You got a distraction over there or something? So that's the,
and then having a role model, right? Of someone who's done that and seen that, and then you're like, oh wow, that's possible.
Right. So the first thing is knowing like, hey, I want to retire when I'm 65 with X amount of money. And then you say, well, if I'm saving zero now, at least you're smart enough to know like what I'm doing now is not going to get me there because I'll have saved no money, right? So what do I do? And then it's like kind of cracking that shell, I think, and then looking for role models or people that have done certain things and look at what they've done, look at their habits and try to emulate them in a way that works for you, but will move you towards your goal. On the other hand, you have people who will spend everything they have and like will negative savings. If they'll earn $1,000, they'll spend 999 of it.
Yeah.
On whatever, and a bunch of it they don't need. So I think at the end of the day, it's really having the knowledge and the discipline and really like a future plan. And I think it applies to money, and I think it applies to lots of other things in life. Anything you're trying to achieve goal wise will more likely than not require some sort of investment on your part, whether it's time, it's money, it's sort of mental focus, whatever it is. And I think it's important that you connect the need to do those things with what you're trying to achieve, and you stay on point and use that as like, I need to get here, or I want to get here, because there's a lot of distractions along the way.
Yeah. Well, and then it's down to like, if I have a goal, what am I willing to sacrifice? Or, it's interesting, that word sacrifice is, it has the word sacred in it. So the goal is what's sacred, and everything else is sacrificed. And it becomes like an arrow, right? Where it's like, it's pointing the way, and anything that's on the outside or the fringes of the arrow, that's the distraction. And those are things that like we waste money on. Or like, one of the terms I use with a lot of the people in Master of You is like the difference between what I call spending versus investing. So if you're buying organic food, that's an investment. If you're buying candy, you're spending money, and it's going to have a negative cost over time. So I just draw a line. Let me know what do you think of this, but I just kind of draw a line. You're either doing one or the other, just to kind of simplify it, right? You're either going towards things that will compound towards better, or you're going towards things that are, there's probably a net neutral, but things that really net neutral, I would say, is actually compounding towards worse because there's an opportunity cost.
Yeah, that's totally spot on, right? So there is an opportunity cost, and like doing nothing, I would say, is net neutral, right? You just don't do anything. You just, like, you don't invest in yourself, you don't spend money, but you don't do anything. But that will ultimately have a negative impact, a negative return, so to speak. And clearly, like the example you gave,
because it's like inflation is entropy.
Well, inflation, it just, it raises the bar, right? Everything, if I pay, $1 for a McDonald's hamburger now, in 20 years from now, it probably won't cost $1. It may be a bad example, but most things go up in price. Yeah. And that, that's money. And that's also, things that you want to achieve, in life, and the cost of getting there goes up over time.
Yeah, and that to me is all part of that. Like, the goal, you're willing to make the sacrifice, and you get good at making sacrifices to a goal. So I knew there were things I wanted to learn before I was 50.
Yeah.
Right. Just like, especially at Yoga Healer, especially with like having a company. I'm like, there's things that I really want. I want to learn before then, because I have this inner sense that like after then it's going to be harder. And I think too, I've worked enough with people in bodies to know that, the game changes. Like, entropy is real, aging's real. There's a number of ways to go around it or about it. Yeah. And if you're not put in, and there's effort, right? Like, there's aligned action, which is effortful. There's a word for it in yoga, which is tapas. And it's very much that arrow. It's the friction of actually, the heat that moves you forward, which means it doesn't just happen. There's no like, it'll just happen. It's like, no. You make it happen. And by making it happen, you change. And that's like this fundamental part of transformational investment, right? Where you're actually investing in your own ability to be more in the future.
Yeah. You'll change, and you'll change the earlier you start, you'll change at a faster pace than you would if you started later. But even if you start later, you can still get on that curve and start to change. You don't have to start when you're younger. Clearly it helps towards your end goal because you'll achieve it faster. But either way, you should make those investments in yourself, whatever they may be, towards your goal. And I think that's the key that we're kind of locking in on, is aligning the investments that you're making, and doing those, and at the same time staying away from, call it negative investments, negative return investments, or bad habits, or whatever, buying candy, whatever you want to call it, staying away from that, right? And because those move you away from your goal. And if you're really fixated on your goal, then do the things that will help you get there. And there's a discipline in that, because there's there's a discipline that a lot of people, that's where it breaks. They design what they want to do. Like, for example, in finance, yeah, I want to retire at 65, but then they save a bunch of money, say over 10, 15 years, and they have a nice little retirement nest egg starting to build and earn compound interest, et cetera. But then they see something that they really want, like, hey, there's a nice Ferrari or whatever, that they want to buy, whatever it is, and like, well, I don't have any money in the bank, but I do have money in my retirement fund. Let me just go get that and use that for this because I really want that. And now you've basically taken away all of your investment. You've negated so much of what you've done, and that applies to money, and that applies to lots of things. If you start doing bad habits after years of, say, good habits, you're gonna hurt yourself, and it's not easy. It requires a discipline, and it requires focus and reinforcement. And I think people around you who are aligned with your goals, that will help you get there and call you out when you start to deviate, and that's tough.
Well, and what you just described, it's tough, but you can also design for it, right? And
you can design for it. Absolutely. And you should.
And you should. Yeah. I mean, and that's what we find is that our habits aren't usually our own. Like, they're pretty much cultural, whether it's like in a family culture or a work culture.
Yeah.
And they're cultural. So if you know that, then you get yourself in the right culture. You get yourself in the culture of the people that you want to become like.
That's right.
They're already that way. So
That's
then
right.
the culture carries you instead of you trying to carry a culture. You can't carry a culture.
No.
And they talk about this a lot in yoga and a lot in yoga teacher trainings and whatnot, because, there's a saying that's something akin to when the student is ready, the teacher appears. So you can't, so there's a lot of question, right? Of like, can you enhance readiness? Like, what can you do to enhance someone's ready? Because, basically healers and yogis want to help people, and they see people that are suffering and they're like, why are you doing the same damn thing that keeps hurting you? Like, stop. Right. I can help you stop and start doing what you actually, would make you feel great. And
habits are super hard to break. I mean, that, right? I mean, they are ingrained habits. I mean,
founded a company on it.
Right. I mean, but it's true. I mean,
yeah,
it's a truism.
It's not just habits, though, because we're talking about habits. But I want to say, because more of what I see now, what's compounding for me, because I started investing in body wisdom at about 25 years old, and now I'm 47. So I have 22 years. If we look at compound interest, I have 22 years of having invested in subtle body wisdom from the East. And there's a payoff. I can see it.
Yeah.
And I can see it. I can see it now that oh, those were good. Every minute, every minute with a good teacher, any minute of honest practice on the mat or on the cushion, there's a building up of that. There's another saying in yoga that's something akin to no effort on the path is ever wasted.
Mm-hmm.
So no effort on the path, no matter how long we're talking, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, no effort is ever wasted.
Yeah.
And when we really tap into that, and then and there's a part of this that you mentioned, with the people around you, what I find most people don't understand, the people that say want to take one of our courses and are I don't have the money. And I'm that doesn't make any sense, because people can find money. People can find crowd. You just have to get curious about where the money is and how to get it.
It's certainly out there, right?
It's certainly out there.
There's ways to find that if you want to make the investment in yourself. You really want to do it. It may require a little work to find it, but it's there.
Yeah, it should require work. That's the top us. That's the point. Yeah. And if it doesn't require work, it's because you already did the work.
Right.
Right?
Right. That makes sense. Yeah.
So to me, with this, there's a respect for that accumulation of wisdom, right? That there's people that know a lot more than any one of us does in any given area, right? So it's fine, and that's the investment, is oh, there's someone that knows more about this than I do, and there's a culture of people around them that also know a lot more about this than I do. So if I hang out with them, I'll get there faster. And so it actually makes sense to invest in wisdom. It makes sense to pay for wisdom. And that's something that I'm it doesn't register with people. And I know even for me, like I've made I feel like I get a college education every year, like I'm continually investing, but oftentimes I see it as an expense. Like I have to retrain my nervous system, be like, no, that's not an expense. That's an investment. And you might not even know how that'll pay back until you're in your 70s.
And I think, like, for example, in our culture, a lot of people do see, say, investment in a college education, for example, as an investment, right? They don't necessarily see it. It's expensive. It's stupidly expensive, but they do see it as an investment in their future. But then they stop and they're, that's what you're investing in wisdom. You're going to be around other people like you who are looking to learn. You're going to be around smart professors who have knowledge that they want to help you with and give to you and help shape your thinking and all of that. Like, why wouldn't you make that investment in other parts of your life? In the same, of course you should, right? But our culture, I think, is very like, well, education is, it's, you go to high school, you go to college, you go get a job, and then it pays off in your job. And that's like the thinking for a lot of people who go to college. At the end of the day, like, why wouldn't you open your mind and think there's other investments that I can be making that will have equal, if not better returns for me, like towards my goal, of what I want to achieve.
Yeah.
I think that's important.
Hey, it's Kate. And my question is, do you need to change your life? Like, seriously, do you need a shift? So I have a 10-day crash course for you to get aligned for action. And there's 3 basic parts to it. One is you ignite your ambition and clarify your vision. The second is you align your time and your space to fulfill that vision and activate your ambition. And the third part is we usually need to do this with other people. There's usually other people that are part of our vision. And we need a plan. And that's the third part. So it's 10 days, it's fast. Because you're a podcast listener, I get to give you a discount. You can find the special discount link in the show notes, or it's yogahealer.com/change-your-life-exclusive. It's a $500 course. Because you're a podcast listener, you can get it for $47. It's well worth it. I promise it's more than worth the $47. Like, if you really do it, it will help you step into your next ambitions with clarity, with a better plan, and with your head screwed on right and pointed forward to go into action. Again, yogahealer.com/change-your-life-exclusive. It's worth the $47.
And I want to talk about that from that starting point of either you have a job or you're self-employed. So we'll use those 2 scenarios. So you've had jobs, I've been self-employed. We've both been actively learning within our professions the entire time, right? And that's not true of everyone. Like, I realized pretty early on in the game that I was self-employed, right? And a lot of my colleagues didn't. Like, they didn't realize, like, because you're self-employed, like, you have to pave the way forward.
Yeah.
If you ever want a pay raise, like, you've got to figure it out, and you've got to figure out how businesses work and how, where you fit into the marketplace, and therefore how marketing works. And there's all these things that you take it on yourself to learn so that you can grow in that career path. And then obviously the other skills that you need in order to be more useful.
But in order to get that knowledge, you attached yourself to really smart people who are really good in those things.
Yeah, that's right.
And you learn from them.
And I paid them. I paid them to teach me. I paid them to let me hang out with them. I paid them to let me into their communities.
Yeah, that was your investment in yourself.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So, and the same thing exists within companies, but not everyone does this, right? Like, I know a number of people who they don't really get raises year over year. Yeah. Because they don't really look to add additional value.
That's certainly something that would help you get a raise at a company is what, the value that you're bringing to, your boss or the company overall that increases over time. Then of course they will want to pay you more money. If you don't, you got to fight harder for it. And more likely than not these days, it's not really happening. And I think that's what a lot of people are starting to realize, that they have to be constantly thinking about what value am I bringing, whether you're self-employed and doing something for clients, or whether you're working for a big company. every job, every role like has a value to it. And, look, it's easier, I think, not to really think about that too much. It's like, well, I'll go in, I'll have a job, I'll get paid, I'll go home and I'll do whatever I want to do. And that's kind of my life. And all of a sudden, you may find yourself that they figured out somehow that your value is the same as somebody who's making half your salary can bring the same value, and they just hire that person and get rid of you. And that happens all the time. And that'll resonate, with a lot of people who've gone through that over time. Or, they'll automate it, whatever you're doing, they'll, figure out some way for a computer to do it. So it really, the way to avoid that, I think, is to be constantly investing in your own value, what you bring, and also, to morph and to change and to try to look forward. And the way to do that is, you have to make investments in really understanding, if you're in a particular company, like, where's the company headed? What's the strategy? How do I become part of, that solution and the future, and making sure that you're on the sort of the cutting edge of that stuff as much as you can. Because if you don't, you're gonna get left behind, like a lot of people. And that's a big issue, I think, in this country right now, personally. Probably globally, I would say, not even the country, it's globally.
Yeah.
And
I mean, and we get to experience the plus side of that at Yoga Healer, where it's like we can hire from anywhere.
Yeah.
And we can look really specifically at what we want. Like, what languages do we want the person to speak? Like, what kind of personality? What, I mean, you can just what time zones are preferable for us to interact with. I mean, the whole thing.
For our business model here, that's a plus. Again, like, technology is a great thing, and it enables, all the massive amounts of data and information. And, while scary, it's helpful for us. In big companies, that can get lost on, you get caught in that, just the massiveness of the pool of people kind of running around, and you can't see it. You're in the middle of it, and you just can't, the technology, all of a sudden it comes and it can do lots of harm to a lot of roles that people thought were, untouchable, and things of that.
Right.
I've seen it.
So with a few things, because when you look back at your career and how you didn't walk in as COO. So
Right.
like, how did you strategically move your future forward in the direction you wanted it to go within a company?
Well, I think I thought about what job did I want? Like, what did I like to do? A little bit combined of what do I think I'm good at? And how do I, where do I see that leading to over time? And there were folks that I knew in different roles in these companies who were chief operating officers, and that role appealed to me for a number of reasons. And, I clearly was fairly low on the totem pole, especially in these entry level roles. But I sort of modeled myself on what they were doing and how they did it, and tried to learn from them, and they're all different, and they all have different approaches, but I tried to find, a one commonalities that seemed to work with different people, that I could sort of pull out, like a concept that, yep, there's a thread that is consistent, and it's consistently successful for these people. And I'll, like in terms of leadership and things of that nature, in terms of knowledge, like what did they know, they understood certain, technical parts of, say, the businesses I were in, or finance, or whatever it was, people management, all of the things, right? I looked at what they did well. I also looked at what they did, I thought, poorly, because nobody is perfect, of course.
Yeah, sure.
And said, well, let's not do that. If I want this kind of a role, and which I found appealing at a lot of levels, then I have to kind of move myself towards that knowledge and that behavioral, to get there. And that's just, it was an investment, right? For me, it was an investment in time to talk and, make connections with these folks, and read, and, and take different roles where I was exposed to various aspects of companies, and I was able to learn. And I paid attention to it, because to me, it was purposeful, trying to get towards a goal at the end of the day. And then there became a point in time where, for me, you and I have talked about it before, where I felt like, okay, I've had my fill of big giant companies. I wanted to do something more entrepreneurial. That was an itch that I wanted to scratch, and this happened to work out very well. But I think not everybody's going to feel that way. Again, it comes down to, so the point of that was like, goals can change, right? I sort of got to where I wanted to get to,
Right.
and I liked it, but I felt like there was something else that I had a new goal. The new goal was,
and that's the nature of it, right? Like there's chapters and there's
this is right lifestyle, in terms of, hey, for example, my commute from where I live to down to the city was going to be over 2.5 hours each way. So I was looking, and it didn't happen yet, but I was close. And then it was going to turn into 5 hours a day on a combination of cars, trains, boats, whatever it was. and that was just, that was, to me, that was like, I'm not doing that, right? That just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So
I just want to speak to the identity evolution, right? Because there's that plasticity that was recurrent in your story of like you had to change and learn and grow, and you had to model new behaviors based on the role model, right? So if we look at those and in Master of You and the book and in the course, it's like that's what we get good at. We get good at not being attached to ourselves, like not getting attached to our own personality, realizing that at any next level of growth, whether that's going from COO of E-Trade to integrator at Yoga Healer, right? Which might not look like a whole new territory, but it really is, right? It's like a totally different world, and there's an enormous amount of plasticity. And the same thing's true with any new member coming into any one of our courses, where it's like, okay, who you are now, like something has to die on the stake of who you want to become, right? And it's always true, and it's always true for everyone. And yoga knows that, like yoga, that's why there's so much of a better developmental philosophy from the East around the ego and like where it fits in. And it like basically fits into like hold the universe enough of you together enough so that you can become who you're becoming next.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great way of saying it, right? There's an evolution, right? And there are steps, some steps are larger than other steps. For me, this is one of the, say, a larger step in my evolution, but I view it as just part of my evolution. It's more, there's more structural change that's going on, but it's still part of my evolution. And so is everything else that I did before, and will everything else, that I do after it, continually evolving. And I think I'm very open to that, right? I personally, I look for that. I think it's part of life's journey at the end of the day. I think for a lot of people, they get stuck in kind of who they are, what they are, and they don't necessarily, without a little push, don't necessarily see that there are opportunities to change. And it's a good thing. It may be scary for some people. Some people are like, yeah, absolutely, let's go forward. I'm all in. But being all in is important too. It's really important. Like you can't do these kinds of things kind of half-baked. You have to really commit.
Because the old personality is too strong. I mean, there's work for that too in yoga.
Look, there are times where, we're in the middle of whatever we're doing here, and one of my old colleagues will just text me and they'll tell me about whatever's going on at the banks and, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, wow, boy, that would be easy just to go and fix that problem. But, again, like that's, you have to, you want to break those habits and say, look, I'm on this journey now. And that was a fun journey, and it got me to a certain place in life. And I think it's important not to, as beat yourself up to where you are, like anybody coming into our courses, right? It's easy to be negative about yourself. Well, I can't believe I'm this. I can't believe I'm that. I blew all my money, or I have terrible habits, or whatever it is, right? It's very easy to be down. Well, you are where you are, right? And there are things that got you there, positives, negatives, etc. Now start here and build. Let's go forward.
It's really fascinating that in the body, there's connective tissue. It's called fascia, and it holds the shape that someone's in.
Yeah.
So when someone starts investing more in body wisdom, they start to be able, their fascia becomes more malleable, essentially, like the practices themselves. I mean, even from the littlest thing, like the Wim Hof breathing practices, to taking cold showers, to doing yoga, like all of it, being hydrated, like sipping hot water all the time, like it all starts to make the whole body much more malleable and much more plastic. And it's interesting because there's this, that needs to happen at the level of mind too, right? So that we keep becoming open. And in the last year, so many people lost their jobs, so many things went sideways for so many people. And it was as if it was surprising. And then for people that had been very malleable all along, there was no surprise in any of it. It was like, oh yeah, of course. And then to some degree, there was that. There was that sense of,
even if they were surprised, they can adjust, right? They
adapt, adjust.
If they didn't expect it, they can adapt and
be
malleable, right?
And that's sort of that, because they're already malleable. They're not. Right. There's less of a rigidity, and to me, that it just goes back to that, like what happens to principal if you're not making interest on your principal, right? It's like it gets more and more static. There's less. You can buy less with that money. You get more and more just like rolled over by the world.
100%. That's right. I mean, I think it goes back to those same investment principles we started talking about at the beginning is, making good investments that have positive returns, having goals in mind, positive returns towards your goals, starting early enough, and finding a way to discipline yourself and break, kind of whatever structure that wouldn't have maybe allowed you to do that before. And kind of make yourself more malleable and have a longer term view towards what you want to achieve. I think they're all those things are totally connected. And you're right about like connective tissue inside whatever we call it, like our habits or who we are. For me, again, it's tough. It's always tough to break those, especially if you've been doing it for as long as I have, right? So one of the benefits of being here and talking to you every day and other folks around our community is I'm getting osmosis of what that means, and I'm committed to learning, and I want to see where it takes me, because the few things that I've started to do, I feel so much better, so much more focused personally, and I feel like, wow, I'm headed, like I've got like little rocket engines, kind of behind me, like accelerating forward, and that's great. And I think a lot of people, feel that way after they start to see returns on their investments. Wow, that's really growing, and it's growing faster than I thought it would.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's like the next phase of that, and I think this really applies to how a lot of people invest in their 401ks or whatnot, is like it becomes automated, right?
Yeah.
And what we're doing in Master of You, so much of what I've seen in that, developing that course and the book and the curriculum and the community, is that there's a point when it clicks into automation, or maybe a series of points where it becomes more automatic. And in the same way that the Body Thrive habits, or these habits of yogis in their Body Thrive course, like eventually people have enough of the habits automated, and we're never looking for 100% habits automated 100% of the time. But it's not even a goal. It's not even part of the picture. It's just enough automation that you get that compounding success, that you get that compounding interest happening of its own accord. Like you're just in the zone, and you're just living in the zone.
Yeah,
so then
I think there's I haven't gotten there yet with this, but I will. There's like a tipping point between your view of like, I'm making an investment and I know I got to do it. It kind of goes against maybe who I am, but I'm going to do it. And then all of a sudden there comes a point where it is who you are. You've become now this person who's doing this, and you're not even thinking about it anymore.
No.
It's just part of your investment.
It's harder to not do it. It becomes harder.
That's right. It becomes against your structure not to do those things, and you feel weird like not doing them, and that's I think what happens. But again, like that time where you're kind of moving along the path before you get to that point, that's the zone where you continually have to.
If you're not in a community, and you're not paying for a coach, like good luck is all I have to say, because there's that long zone where there's no return. Like you're not seeing an ROI at all, and you're just doing the hard work, and you have the most resistance because the old pattern is the strongest it's going to be.
Yeah, I think in investments it's similar, in terms of, people, there are people out there who are financial advisors, and many good ones who, will talk to you about your goals and help you set an investment plan, towards your goals. And they're good at it, and they're like your financial coach, and they'll keep you in check. If they see the new Ferrari in your driveway, it's like, hey, do you really need to buy that? And I think it's the same principle applies, for other types of coaching, right? It's the same thing, and they'll say, like, this is the best way forward. And all of a sudden, at some point, you don't even need them anymore because you're
you have the system. Yeah,
you've gotten there, right? You do it on your own. And they maybe use them as just a sort of a checkpoint to make sure that you haven't deviated. Because it's really hard to be in space, and check if you're deviating from a line if your only reference point is yourself. It's always good to other reference points and just say, I think I'm right, but let me just check and make sure that this is the right thing. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And it's why, I think it's why our dynamic groups methods and dynamic dialogue is really important, because I find it, especially at our live events, where that skill comes into action, where people can be honest with each other to give good feedback in a way that's so super helpful to each other. And it surprises people, because then they start to realize, like, wow, I could always be in relationships where I could grow at this rate with honest and accurate feedback. And that's a total game changer, because now there's kind of mirrors everywhere, and they're helping me make the right sacrifices to the.
Exactly. There's so much power in that sort of knowledge base around you, whether it's a coach in particular, or whether it's other people going through the same thing.
Yeah.
That's the compounding interest part, right? It's you're not doing it on your own. Like, you're all of a sudden you've got other energy helping you, pushing you along and moving at like a faster pace. That's the power of the whole thing.
That is. So in Master of You, it's like the automation there is, I find it's really around the vision.
Yeah.
And then the critical issues.
Yeah.
And then the strategy, and then the implementation of that strategy. And people are so weak on all of them, like vision.
Yeah.
Actually identifying the right critical issues.
Yeah.
Using the critical issues to create better strategy.
Yeah.
And then actually executing on the strategy that they created.
And the funny thing is, what you just described in terms of people is exactly the same as we would describe in working in a large company, right? It's the same exact thing. What are the issues we're trying to solve? Developing a strategy around that, and then ideas. And then, of course, my saying is always, good idea is worth a nickel, because it's all about the implementation. You have to, you have to implement those ideas. You have to execute and those ideas. And same thing in a business, same thing with yourself. It's one thing to have a plan. It's the other thing, really the important thing, to execute the plan. But you can't execute a plan if you don't have a plan.
You can't. Right. And you can't have a plan if you don't really know what your vision is, which brings us back to that first part of the conversation.
That's right.
What's fascinating in Master of You is that it's like after that phase of fire, and then the implementation part, which we say is time or air, how do you bring it into the field of time in real time? It's like that brings up the real issues. And that we call water element, right? If it's like, that'll churn your real issues up, whether like you just don't actually commit, which we talked about earlier, right? Yeah. Or whether there was something off in your strategy, or whether or not like the degree that you needed to grow that plasticity was really more than you could handle at the time, like, or whatever it is, right? Yeah. Those issues will then come up, and then that gives even better information into the next cycle. And so this chapter after chapter, cycle after cycle, is what we're looking to automate in there.
Yeah. I think that's right. And I think it's, I was going to say, it's not only, I think your initial goal is probably not what your end goal is going to be. Your initial goal is at a point in time. It's based on what you know at that time, based on what people around you know, and you kind of set it out there. It's a place better than you are now, better than you are now. But once you maybe get to that place or get close to that, you may look at that and say, well, actually, that's not really what I want to achieve. I want to achieve this. So there's another step that then you have to kind of replan and re-strategize, and okay, well, how do I get to there, right? What does that mean, and how do I implement that? So it really never ends. If you're interested in personal growth and economic, financial growth and all of these things, you know, you can't look at it as like something that you're finished with at any point in time, because you're always evolving, always growing. You'll always be looking, especially if that's all automated, your natural inclination will be to look for, okay, how do I grow some more? How do I hit the next level of my growth?
Well, and at that point, opportunities are just showing up.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You know, I think that's what happens. So, you know, I think one of the reasons that I love being around here is just being exposed to people who have that kind of same view, and all the opportunities that I see pop up for people, and the fact that personally I see people being helped. I mean, I really see people improving themselves, and us helping drive them towards, you know, where they want to get to.
Yeah. Well, I'm psyched that you're now in the Master of You Ask Andy calls and helping the course members directly with all things that are not really part of my past and are part of yours. So that's been,
those are to me, those are really fun. You know, we've got a nice crew of people who've shown up to the last few of them, and you know, they seem to enjoy it. I certainly enjoy it, and it's a great experience for me. Something I haven't done before. So if you want to talk about growth, there's like an area I'm growing in.
Yeah, that's great. So thanks so much. I will keep having these conversations on Dharma and dollars, and I think another one, you know, the next one we can do can really be around goals, and, you know, what happens when the goals you have are actually other people's goals, and how do you find your own goals?
Man, that's a long conversation around that. I mean, that's not a 2-minute conversation.
Exactly.
Most people can relate to that, I think.
Yeah. And then, you know, if people have questions about or want us to talk more about investing, and more specifically, then just tell us what you want us to talk about. And you can do that by just sending an email to podcast@yogahealer.com, and eventually it'll get to Andy and I. And, you know, for people listening, a great place to start with us is our Change Your Life course. And we'll put info on after this on that, and in the show notes. But that's a place to see whether Master of You is really worth it for you to invest in, because it's a right now, Master of You is a $15,000 2-year experience to help you automate hitting your goals, the right goals.
Yeah.
And I take it really seriously, and it's amazing to see what's happened with our members in there. Like, to me, that's the hot damn. We tested it for 5 years. And now with Andy on the team with helping with coaching, it's super exciting.
It is fun. And for me, like I said, the fun part is seeing people move towards their goals, right? And get better, help define them, and all of that. So yeah, I think it's a great option for people. And I hope they, you know, explore it a little bit, and Change Your Life is certainly a great entree point into all of that.
Awesome.